we've officially reached the stage of punchy.
Yep, we have. And Art Nouveau foam stamps, take 2, action.
Action! The stamps are not new by the time you see this video, but we thought it would be fun to take an opportunity to come back and play with them again. And this time we used you've seen us use Woodies with them before because that's water soluble and they work really well. But we decided to just approach this a little bit differently. There's no gel plate involved today, which is pretty unusual for us.
Yes, no gel plate.
So Elizabeth is using the Woodies and she's doing some stamping that gives you a nice watercolor-like effect. And the thing about the Woodies is that they remain water soluble, so you have the option to work with them after the fact. After you've stamped them, you can come back and re-wet what you've put down to change it a little bit if you want. I'm using Amsterdam acrylic ink, and this, if you think of this as nothing more than very liquidy paint, you just need to keep in mind that this stuff is permanent when it's dry, and I'll talk about, making certain that it doesn't dry on your stamps and those kind of things. But you can get some really interesting effects, different things than you'll get, and I'm gonna flip this over because I did play on the back. Different options than you'll get, or different looks that you'll get if you use an ink pad or you use acrylic ink. And it was kind of fun to explore things in a different way today.
Yeah, it was. I really like the effect that you got with the acrylic ink because we've never done that before.
Right.
And the way, because the ink is so thin, it settles heavier in some areas and thinner in other areas. So you get it has a hand done feel.
Yes.
It doesn't seem so ink pad stamped. And it has like that, more of an artistic look.
There you go.
Yeah, and then so the thing that I like a lot about the Woodies is that when they dry on the stamp, you don't have to be in a rush to get them clean because it's gonna ruin the surface of the stamp, and you don't have to be in a rush to stamp it because you just mist it with water, it reactivates, and then you stamp it. So you have more time to plan or pontificate about what you're gonna do with them.
Well, and you can be very deliberate about how you color them. That's the best option about
Yes.
the Woodies, because you're working with what isn't really, even though it's kind of a big pencil tip, it's a pencil tip, and if you sharpen it, and there's a special sharpener for the Woodies because they are so big around in diameter, you can sharpen it and you can get very specific about how you color them, and that's really an advantage that unless you're using something that takes the form of those pencils, you can't accomplish that with an ink pad. You can do some things with the little ink pads, but you cannot do what you show with the Woodies. So it's fun to play, it's fun to experiment and see what happens.
Yeah, I really like the way that you can apply color in very specific areas with the Woodies. That gives you it gives you, you remember when they used to do, you have 3 different stamps, one for each color.
Oh,
and then
right.
you line them up so you get 3 different colors. That was a pretty complicated process. You had to line it up. You had to have 3 different stamps. Well, we kind of, cut to the chase with this, with the Woodies. So that's the cool thing about the Woodies, among other things. So just new ways to
play with new stamps.
Play with new stamps.
Yeah.
New.
Right.
Everything's new.
Shall we go do it?
Yeah, let's go do it. So today we are also playing around with my new Art Nouveau foam stamp designs. And aside from ink pads and acrylic paint on the gel plate, another way I love to use these stamps is with Stabilo Woodys. Stabilo Woodys are water-soluble pencils that have also sort of a half crayon, half colored pencil feeling to them. Except for that they're water soluble. So that works out great for the foam stamps because I spritz a little water on the nonstick craft mat and I get the front of the stamp wet. And then the pencils will dissolve as you put them into the water. But you can also put your pencils in water first and then put them on the stamp. There's 2 different ways of doing it, and whatever works best for you. I might have put down a little too much water there. So the pencil is just going to blend so nicely when it hits that water because it's water soluble. So you get a nice wet color right on there. And the difference between using these stamps with the ink pad or the paint on the gel plate with the Woodies also is that you can color, you can add a whole bunch of colors within one stamp. So you can't really do this with the ink pad or the gel plate. I'm going to add color very specifically. So I'm blending in here into the green there. I want to get good coverage on this. And then in the middle, I'm going to use some of this reddish orange and blend it into that. You can get some nice soft blends in these too. I'll even add some darker green at the top. So yeah, this is nice because you can really control where the colors go, and you don't have to be in a hurry, because if it dries on here, all you have to do is spritz it again with water and that will reactivate it, and then you stamp it. So that is my color application. And then I'm gonna bring my, my now wet rice paper, and I'm gonna stamp this. So I'm gonna put it over and stamp. And it's also gonna give me kind of a watercolor, watery effect when I stamp it, hopefully. Yeah, wow, look at that.
Oh, pretty.
And what I love about the way that it works on this rice paper is the rice paper is highly absorbent, so the colors are going to wick out around the edges and give it soft edges and really make it have a watercolor feel. You can totally achieve a crisp edge with a ink pad, stamp pad, or acrylic paint. So this is a totally different look with the soft edges and the color applied in very specific areas. So it's a lot of fun to do that. So now we've got some that are dried. And basically what you do is, if you actually let them dry before you get a chance to stamp them, or if you want to go ahead and put color on all of them first and then stamp afterward, like I did, what you do is you just spritz it to reactivate it with a little bit of water, and you give it a few minutes. So it's a little bit lighter. I think I could have waited a little bit longer because it didn't reactivate all of it. But either way, it's nice light as well. But yeah, just spritz it and give it a little bit more time to reactivate before you stamp it. Have a little more patience than I did. But what's nice about this is, while you're applying the color, you don't have to be in a rush like you do with acrylic paint, because you're afraid that it's gonna dry too quickly. You get to color them all and then spritz them, give it like 2 or 3 actual minutes, and then you can stamp them. So there you have it. Yet another fun effect with foam stamps and this new Art Nouveau collection.
Over the course of the multiple releases of foam stamps that Elizabeth has had, we've used a variety of different media, and I thought today it might be fun to step into something that we certainly haven't used recently, or at least I'm not remembering it. So I have Amsterdam acrylic inks. If you think about these as nothing more than acrylic paint that's in a very fluid, very thin-bodied form, then you'd be right on track. So the thing that I'm going to caution you about right away is that if you let the acrylic ink dry on the surface of your stamps, it's going to stay there. So off to the side, I have a wet paper towel that I'm going to use to put the stamp face down in. You can have a tub of water. You can just spritz the top of the stamp. I mean, there's a variety of ways to do that to avoid letting them dry on the surface. So this morning I was playing, and this is just a scrap piece of paper, and this is named Sinuous. And I just played with this a little bit. Now, one of the interesting things is that you can see some darker areas here, and that repeated here when I was playing with Water Lily. It really depends on how the acrylic ink gathers in certain areas on the stamps. Now, I'm choosing to put the acrylic ink on the nonstick craft sheet, and I'm kind of spreading it around with my finger. You might find a better way to do that, but a gel plate won't work. This stuff is too fluid. It's going to bead up right on it. So this is kind of my solution. You can do whatever works for you. So you have to, these are pigments, so you have to give these a little bit of a shake. And I'm just going to put some out, and I'm going to blend them with my finger. That's probably more than I need. With a foam stamp, with an ink pad, you can be a little bit more precise about how you apply this. So for my purposes, I'm just going to stamp, 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 and see what happens. So initially, if I tap this in, you can see that I've got a lot of ink in certain places. And the solution to that is to come along and to keep tapping. I want to keep in mind that I have 2 separate colors there until I get a reasonable amount of color on there. And then I have a surface here that's got a fair amount of paint on it, and I'm just going to stamp. So I'm probably going to see less wicking or absorption on this, only because the paint acts as a sealer. So it really depends on what surface it is that you're using and whether or not it's already got anything on it. Hopefully. Oh, see, that looks good. Now there's a little bit of smush here because, again, I'm working on something that's not really going to absorb. Let's try a second generation print and see what happens. But I'm gonna, rather than re-ink this, I'm just gonna stamp this on plain old watercolor paper to see what happens. Because that's an option too. You can do multiple stampings or multiple generations before you come back and re-ink. And look at that. That worked out really well.
Wow, look at that. That's great. More detail.
Yes. So the first one, if you're a little bit generous with the ink, it can be a little bit sloppier. You can see a little bit more, blurring or combining of elements, but you know, that second generation, and let's just go for the gusto and try a third here and mess around and see what happens. Now I'm pressing a little bit harder because that was obviously drying as I was talking, but there you go. So there are so many different ways that you can work with foam stamps. Something that we didn't demo today is these are all additive techniques. You can do subtractive techniques. If I had a layer of paint brayered out on a gel plate, I could touch the stamp to it, press it down, pick it up, and lift that image off of the plate. So keep in mind that there's way more that you can do with these than what we're showing you here today.
Okay, well, that is the last of the series of videos from Sacramento for spring of 2024. You will see them in no specific order.
No.
So my saying this won't make any sense at all, but it seemed like a good closing remark.
Right. It's April, and by the time I come back, it'll be July, so it'll be summer officially when I come back, and we can roast outside.
Oh, yes. It's hot, hot, hot here.
That's okay. I'm good with that.
All right, then. We will see you next time.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye.